Welcome to the news on NTA International. I am Stella Inameti, and my sign language interpreter is Precious Ozoimena. Now the headlines. President Trump begins Middle East tour with premium on global peace. Nigeria hosts Rabat process with premium on Euro-African dialogue, leveraging potential of Nigerian youth to harness their skills for sustainable development. Nigeria partners Japan on teacher training for rapid educational development. Thanks for joining us. Now on the news in full. President Donald Trump is on the first major international trip of his second term as he works to sharp relations with a trio of key allies and prove his might as a deal maker on the world stage. Kolo Mohammed tells us more.
President Trump, who began the tour of the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, received a warm welcome from Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh. The two leaders retreated to a grand hall in Riyadh Airport where Trump and his aides were served traditional Arabic coffee. President Trump said he believes a lot of friendship exists between himself and Saudi Crown Prince, who committed a sum of $600 billion in a new Saudi investment in the U.S., even though Trump teased $1 trillion would have been better. Both leaders had lunch at the Royal Court. Around the Crown Prince and President Trump were Saudi business titans willing to do epic business in the U.S. given the chance. President Trump's next stop on his tour of the Middle East is Qatar, and Straits of Doha have been adorned with U.S. and Qatari flags ahead of the visit. U.S. Ambassador to Qatar said the visit by U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to rekindle an edge of understanding between Qatar and the U.S.
This visit feels like a crescendo, feels like the moment of great sort of celebration of the relationship between Qatar and the United States. Qatar's efforts at mediation in the region have only grown.
The entourage is expected to round out the 4-day Middle East tour at the United Arab Emirates, UAE. President Trump has spoken at the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum. The U.S. President will also travel to Qatar and United Arab Emirates this week. The U.S. announced a weapons sale of over $1.4 billion to the UAE ahead of Trump's visit. A lot of deals between the two countries are expected to be announced during his visit, including investment in AI, chips manufacturing, and energy. Kolo Muhammad, NTA News.
Mali's military ruler on Tuesday approved a bill revoking the country's political party's charter, which the opposition sees as a step towards its dissolution. According to a presidential decree, the suspension of the charter, which regulates the functioning, creation and financing of political parties, marks a new act of repression of dissenting voices in the West African country, ruled by the army since 2 coups in 2020 and 2021. Again, details with Kolo Mohammed.
Junta Chief General Assimi Goita's approval comes a day after the military-appointed parliament, the National Transitional Council, adopted the proposal. The National Assembly, organized in late April, virtually wholly boycotted by the opposition, called for the dissolution of parties and the toughening up of their creation. All dispositions of the law regarding political party charter are and remain revoked. The decree from General Goita's office said, since the twin coups, a number of retaliatory measures, legal proceedings, and dissolution of portion of association have left the Malian opposition considerably weakened. That squeeze on civic space comes against the backdrop of clamor by the authorities for the country to unite behind the military. Since 2012, the country has been mired in violence carried out by jihadist groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, as well as other criminal groups. In other news, the United Nations Human Rights Office has warned that the deportation of hundreds of Venezuelan immigrants from the U.S. to El Salvador is raising human rights concern. In March, the U.S. government deported to El Salvador more than 200 Venezuelan immigrants alleged to have ties to the trendy Aragua gang, paying Salvadoran government to imprison them.
The UN Human Rights Office has information from family members and lawyers regarding more than 100 Venezuelans believed to be held in Secot. These reports indicate that many of the detainees were not informed of the US government's intention to deport them to be held in a third country, that many did not have access to a lawyer, and that they were effectively unable to challenge the lawfulness of their removal before being flown out of the US.
Reports say since then, they have had no access to lawyers or ability to communicate with their families. Neither the U.S. nor Salvadoran government have said how the men could eventually regain their freedom. Kolom Muhammad, NTA News.
Vice President Kashim Shettima says through critical reforms in key sectors of the economy, the Tinubu administration has addressed most of the critical issues and creating the right environment for investments in Nigeria. State House correspondent Abdurrahman Jibrila reports that the Vice President stated this when he received a delegation from the Islamic Development Bank Group led by the head of its regional hub, Hamad Hundal, on a courtesy visit at the presidential villa. He pointed out that with well-thought-out interventions in human capital development, nutrition, agriculture, health, education and promotion of digital trade, the administration has demonstrated commitment in addressing challenges in critical sectors. Vice President applauded Nigeria's partnership with the Islamic Development Bank, noting that both entities are based primarily on the country's national interest, noting that the bank's programs in Nigeria aligned with the renewed hope agenda of President Tinubu across different sectors.
For your partnership with us, especially in the IDIS program, in the SAPZ programs. These are programs that are very dear to the hearts of the present administration, to the heart of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And I will encourage you to continue this engagement, especially the pace rollout of our halal strategy is coming on stream very soon, with a projected target of over $500 million.
So we have discussed the opportunities to enhance, inshallah, the programs that are already there in terms of economic diversification, supporting the digital economy, the IDIS program, agro-processing, human capital development, as well as the economic diversification through the industries. And we'll also be focusing on bringing more children back to school through the out-of-school children program, and also building the productivity enabling infrastructure, which is focused on increasing the connectivity, the regional corridors, the rural roads, as well as enhancing Nigeria's energy security.
The head of the delegation said the bank was committed to scaling up its intervention through a holistic review of its country engagement framework in Nigeria to prioritize key aspects of the agenda of President Tinubu, highlights key broad strategic objectives of boosting recovery, tackling poverty and building resilience, and driving green economic growth. Nigeria is hosting 57 Euro-African countries for the first thematic meeting of the Rabat process, co-chaired by the Kingdom of Spain. Through the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons, Ruth Aguele reports that the meeting seeks to explore ways of leveraging the potential of Nigerian youth by harnessing their skills for sustainable development.
With a growing demography of the youthful population, and as migration issues evolve, there is a need for Africa to look inwards and come up with homegrown solutions to stem the tide. So here, Nigeria set the stage for 57 Euro-African countries who have gathered for the Rabat process to deliberate on issues of migration that affects young people who are mostly caught in the web of the Japa syndrome. This high-level thematic meeting seeks to explore and harness opportunities for the youth through innovation, skills transfer, and diaspora engagement for sustainable development.
over 60% of our population are under 25. These young men and women carry within them the promise of innovation, resilience, and leadership. And yet, many remain on the margin of these opportunities. We are determined to change this.
Any country that is going to create an employment and good education, innovations for the young people must first create an enable environment for the young people to thrive. And that is what this administration is based on.
All these elements will be quintessential in persuading young generation to avoid risking their lives through irregular channels.
Respect for human rights and rule of law, including international law, protection of migrants, in particular the most vulnerable, against all forms of exploitation and trafficking.
So as we host this meeting here, we hope that we can truly put a stop to the issue of irregular migration and find practical solutions to safe pathways to regular migration.
For the National Commission of Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons, it is a clarion call to nations to identify and share good practices in youth empowerment and innovative migration schemes. And as the dialogue continues, participating countries are expected to promote youth-focused migration initiatives. In Abuja, Ruth Aguela, NTA News.
The Nigeria Social Insurance Trust Fund has identified fraudulent claims as a stumbling block to implementation of the employee compensation scheme. The managing director of the trust fund, Oluwaseun Falele, was speaking at the West Africa Technical Workshop of the International Social Security Association held in Conakry, Guinea. He said falsification of claims exposes the fund to operational risk. Falele decried the low enrollment in the flagship scheme of the fund, the Employee Compensation Scheme, which he stressed is designed to grant relief to workers who suffer workplace injuries or death. He notes that the unstructured informal economic sector, which makes up about 80% of Nigeria's economy, limits enrollment and diminishes the safety nets for those enrolled. "15 teachers training institutions across all geopolitical zones of Nigeria are to benefit from the Japan-funded project, Capacity Building of Teachers to Promote Continuous and Inclusive Access to Safe and Quality Education for Girls in West Africa." Minister of State for Education, Professor Suwaiba Ahmed, at the validation workshop on situational analysis and baseline assessment for the project, says all identified gaps in teachers' capacities will be effectively handled as the training aligns with the Nigerian education sector renewal initiative's goals. Professor Ahmed reiterated that all stakeholders are expected to give their best to ensure the project is a success. Top government functionaries in the public service of the Gambia are in Nigeria for special study exchange visit. The team was at the Bureau of Public Service Reforms to share ideas for best practices, exploring on capacities to address peculiar challenges, as well as building collaboration for institutional capacity. Receiving the team, Director General, Bureau of Public Service Reforms, Dasuki Arabi, who spoke extensively on the ongoing reforms in the civil service, says Nigeria-Gambia relations dates back to the colonial era. The diplomatic relations over the years have been Afrocentric, focusing mainly on issues that promote unity, political, economic, and socio-cultural aspirations. Most of the transactions across the two countries are recorded in areas of trade, energy, security, and enforcement through the ECOWAS Treaty. This visit is believed to creating the platform for exploring more areas of collaboration, harnessing institutional and human capacity for effective and efficient service delivery, as well as faster regional diplomacy within the West African coast. The visitors highlighted the Gambia civil service reforms, which began in 2018, focusing on administrative and human resources. the need for convergence within the government system while requesting for a structured approach to succession and mentorship programs from the Nigerian civil service to be adopted in Gambia, emphasizing the need for backup technical staff. The visit aims at consolidating on the potentials of the blue economy and ensure regional security. And joining us in the studio to speak more on this study tour is Permanent Secretary, Reform, Ministry of Public Service in the Gambia, Sheriff Jallow. We'll come back to that after this break. Stay with us.
I therefore call on my colleagues, or media professionals and editors, to be discerning in their reportage. We must deny these groups the undue publicity they crave. We must take them off the front pages and accurately report them as the criminals that they are, without glorifying their acts or giving credence to their false narratives. These, of course, are not freedom fighters. They are murderers, kidnappers, and destroyers, and they must be presented as such.
Thanks for staying with us. And joining us in the studio to speak more on the study tour between Nigeria and the Gambia is Permanent Secretary, Reform, Ministry of Public Service in the Gambia, Sheriff Jallow. Thanks for joining us. Okay, Mr. Jallow, could you tell us tell the people on the aim of this study tour?
Good evening. Before I answer your question, allow me to thank the government of Nigeria through the Bureau of Public Service Reforms for accepting our request to come over and discuss areas of cooperation and also the reform agenda in general. The main objective of the tour is to learn from the Bureau of Public Service in terms of the reforms that they've been engaged in, the critical success factors, the main challenges, and the way forward in terms of initiating and driving the reform agenda in Nigeria.
Okay, what observations have you made so far concerning the Nigerian civil service?
For the record, our interactions so far, we've been very impressed with the successes that Nigeria is able to attain through the coordinating leadership of the Bureau of Public Service Reform. If you look at the way Nigeria does reform, it's very impressive in the sense that it adopts a whole of government approach, which is essential in driving unity and ensuring the objectives of the governments are attained systematically and through the individual efforts of every public entity. So that observation is very key, and it also very, very remarkable in the sense that despite the big size of Nigeria and the size of your government and also the federal nature of your system, the whole of government approach is able to thrive and succeed here in Nigeria.
Okay, we know there is a collaboration already ongoing, but what areas would you like to see more collaboration with Bureau of Public Service Reforms?
Of course, institutional development, like you said, is continuous, and this is just the first step. Hopefully, our relationship will evolve and develop into something stronger, where we'll be able to have more exchange programs, more knowledge transfer, more technology transfer, more structural interventions in terms of building institutions that are ready to drive the reform agenda in both our countries.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Sheriff Jallow, for your time here with us.
Thank you.
And now moving on, the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, has re-emphasized that President Bola Tinubu welcomes constructive criticism at all times, but will never allow himself to be distracted from doing what is right for Nigeria. He represented the president at the launch of a book titled Being True to Myself, an autobiography of former Jigawa State Governor Sule Lamido, who is also the author. Salihu Abdullahi Gwanara reports.
But since His Excellency the President is represented,
it was a stage of the high and mighty, mostly the political class from across political parties. On stage, on behalf of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is the government spokesman who acknowledged the resilience of Nigerians that are keeping faith in the policies of the renewed hope government that is demonstrating impactful governance.
After a somewhat rocky start, owing to the toughness of the inevitable reforms that he has embarked upon, we are now entering an era of intended beneficial outcomes underlined by macroeconomic stability. Have there been some pains accompanying these efforts? Of course, yes. The President himself will be the first to agree, but he remains resolute in his commitment to introducing programs and policies to alleviate these pains and make life better for all Nigerians. Take the example of the tax clause, which will hopefully be signed any moment. This is intended to grow our revenues, not just for the federal government, but also for the subnationals, while also taking care not to impose additional burden on all taxpayers.
The president described the author and his intellectual property as a significant contribution to Nigeria's political literature and democratic discourse. In Abuja, Salihu Abdullahi Gwanara, NTA News.
The strategic thrust of the national policy on marine and blue economy must be fully internalized and translated into well-prioritized programs, institutional coherence, and measurable outcomes that align with national expectations and reflect the aspirations of Nigerians. The Minister of Marine and Blue Economy, Adegboyega Oyetola, stated this at the opening of a two-day sectorial retreat for the ministry's top management staff in Abuja. Chukunonso Wabweze reports.
With the theme, Maximizing Nigeria's Maritime Potential, a blueprint for sustainable blue economy growth, this 2025 sectorial retreat for top management of the Federal Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, the Minister, Adegboyega Oyetola, says, presents an opportunity to reflect on the progress made, identify areas of improvement, and agree on the steps necessary to raise the ministry's performance across all areas.
We must eliminate duplication, align priorities, and work as a single ecosystem. From port operations to fishery monitoring, we must deploy tools that improve efficiency and transparency. All our interventions must adhere to the principles of accountability, due process, and value for money.
While the minister sets the strategic direction, our task as senior management is to translate this direction into measurable progress driven by discipline, collaboration, and a sense of responsibility.
The retreat's technical section focused on framework for an accelerated implementation of the national policy on marine and blue economy, as well as presentations by heads of agencies on the achievements and challenges of realizing the presidential priorities in 2024.
We are constrained, and it's a big challenge for us to be able to, like His Excellency the Minister had mentioned, collaborate with other agencies in the area of technology. So it's a very major challenge.
We have been able to sustain what is probably the most cardinal and most important area of maritime transport, which is zero incidents in piracy.
At the end of the two-day retreat, the agencies in synergy with the ministry are expected to define and pursue realistic targets in areas such as increasing the marine and blue economy's contribution to Nigeria's GDP within a defined time frame, as well as creating new jobs across core subsectors in the next 1 to 2 years. Chukunonso Nwabweze, NTA News.
And from the National Assembly, senators adopted a motion urging more military deployment to the northeast to address the resurgence of Boko Haram in the northeast. This was sequel to a motion from the Senate Chief Whip, Mohammed Tahir Mugunu, and the 5 other senators from Borno and Yobe states. Senate also called for the provision and use of modern technology to effectively combat the insurgents following recent attacks. The House of Representatives has rejected the second reading of a bill seeking rotational presidency among the 6 geopolitical zones. The constitutional alteration bill sponsored by Deputy Speaker Benjamin Kalu failed to scale through second reading after a voice note which was preceded by debate on the issue among lawmakers.
In every political parties, there is an arrangement that North will do this term, the South will do this term. So I believe this is something that we must not put in our constitution.
The rotation should go down to the governorship in all the states. Mr. Speaker, I believe every zone of the country have people with capacity.
If that geopolitical zone has its own shot, the next one will wait for about 48 years. Regardless of the quality of people we'll have in that zone, this country will lose that opportunity of bringing people that will render public service for this country just because of regional affiliation.
The bill in question, obviously, is set to cure an age-long injustice in our land, especially the minority zones in the region, in Nigeria, which if the president...
The Federal High Court, Abuja, has adjourned to the 27th of June for judgment on the matter between Natasha Akpotu-Uduaghan and the National Assembly. Presiding Judge Justice Binta Nyako fixed the date after parties adopted their final written addresses in the suit filed by Senator Natasha Akpotu-Uduaghan, challenging her suspension by the Senate. The motions filed by the plaintiff include contempt of court order by the Senate, the process that led to her suspension, and equally asked the court to dismiss the motions of the defendants seeking to dismiss the case for lacking in merit, while the first, second, third, and fourth defendants all urged the court to dismiss the suit on the grounds that it lacks merit and that it has also been overtaken by events, as well as that the court lacks the jurisdiction to hear the matter. And that's the news on NTA International. Thanks for watching. I am Stella Ilamiti.